And I have never been able to figure out why Custer's Last Stand has numerous movies, made about George Custer with his back all straight and shooting Indians gallantly, just bang, 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 until those arrows started penetrating his body, But I always found it interesting as to how could people in Fort Wayne, our leaders in Fort Wayne, our politicians, our educators, or even that matter for leaders here in Indiana, how can they stand by and let movies be made where they're featuring the number 2 guy, the number 2 battle, and letting, the history of Kikianga, Fort Wayne, just not exist? I mean, it does exist. You can Google it. Excuse me. But after that battle, then of course, years later, presently, when you start adding up deaths, you realize that these Indians here who occupy the land that's called Kikianga killed the most Americans, the most American terrorists that came here taking their land. Chief Little Turtle was the best security that anybody has ever had. And he's been depicted in history as a bloodthirsty savage when all he was doing was defending his land, his turf, almost like a gang type thing. When they have gang violence today, I tell people that the most powerful gang in Fort Wayne's history had the colors of red, white, and blue. I thought it was funny, but a lot of them didn't. But my point is that Little Turtle has never been given his proper respect. I mean, there's not a day set aside for him here in Fort Wayne. When he, every year, Little Turtle died on July 14th. And there's nothing ever said about him. It might be a small clipping in the paper about him, but if they mention Little Turtle, they're going to talk about Richardsville and everybody else. And the Richardsville Indians, those were different Indians. I mean, they were more content and they're making money. Little Turtle was fighting to preserve this land here. And the most interesting thing I have found about Little Turtle is that usually when somebody kills a lot of Americans, they're going to die. But Little Turtle lived a full life. And he died when he was about 60 years old in 1812. And he was buried with full American military honors. But yet, nobody still knows who he is. He has a grave right over by Lawton Park. You could drive down, I think it's called Lawton Place, drive down the street and you won't even see it. You got to look real close. You see, look like some weeds in the area. And for a man of his stature and to have nothing glamorous denoting his gravesite is a travesty. And I'll come back to that. But I want to move forward here because that's history in the past. And I said earlier that we have a tendency to whitewash our history and change things. Last year, and I think starting in January, my favorite mayor locally is Tom Henry. He started talking about the idea of moving the Anthony Wayne statue from Farman Square over to the courthouse. And a whole lot of debate ensued. People were talking about, oh, you're going to destroy the integrity of the green out there, and the federal government jumped in. Oh, if you put anything out here on this green here, that's going to destroy the integrity. And we're going to take this green off the historic registry, and it won't have a national image or recognition anymore. And this lady from the federal government was talking really hard towards Tom Henry. But Tom Henry said, oh, no, we're going to do this anyway. But, he backed down. And as I'm watching this debate and listening to it, I'm thinking back that when I was a kid, I would go with my grandfather downtown to pay bills. On that same courthouse green was a big building. It was a bank. But I didn't see anything then that showed the integrity, how this is a sacred history landmark here. It was a bank. So now they tear this bank down and claim it to be something great, and therefore you can't even walk across the grass without getting arrested. So I made the point that when the federal government comes in and starts telling Fort Wayne people what to do about Fort Wayne history, that's the tail wagging the dog. because she obviously didn't know the relevance and importance of Fort Wayne history to the United States. And I'll come back to that here. Well, no, let me state this further. And as this argument goes on, what infuriated me, even the library, jumped in and said, we have Little Turtle's a picture of his bust shot and Tecumseh's bust shot in our genealogy department. And I started scratching my head because the way that it was presented like that, they also should have had a lawn jockey going like this on the wall too, because they treated them like they didn't, like they weren't real. I mean, it was in a disrespectful way. But my point in talking about that is, I call this a jibber jabber debate, because you can never talk about Fort Wayne history without talking about Little Turtle, because as they're misdirecting people, talking about Anthony Wayne came here to kill Little Turtle. The head general always aims to take out the top guy on the other side. So I read in the paper here a few weeks ago that the city is going to put $100,000 into planting flowers and trees in Headwaters Park to re-beautify it, and that's great. I'm all for that. But they're going to do this around the Anthony Wayne statue also. Now, I have no problem with Anthony Wayne. I got some good points about him too. But when you put pretty flowers and pretty trees around Anthony Wayne, you distort the fact that he came here to kill people. And I think that should be point blank, real clear, because that's our true history. And for some reason, people don't want to discuss and show our true history. And what I'm seeing here is, after I watched that whole debate, I started seeing holes in it and started seeing problems with it. And so I wrote a letter talking about, Tom Henry, I'm with you. I think that the Anthony Wayne statue should be put right in front of the courthouse. But I don't think he went far enough. I think that you should put Little Turtle right next to him, so that you have Anthony Wayne and Little Turtle right side by side. And my reasoning was, if Anthony Wayne came here to kill Little Turtle, and Little Turtle wound up killing the most Americans, that is equality. So that's why I felt that they should be side by side. So since that's not going to happen, I kept looking and thinking. I said, okay, I got a better idea, and I think that this idea should be adopted, and I think that Governor Pence should looking on this also, because people in Fort Wayne, politicians, have a tendency to have on blinders a lot of times. When you come towards downtown, right now downtown is going through a thing where building is going to start happening here real soon. They're going to build a new big building. At the time they build the building, the politicians and everyone, they're going to start beating their chest, talking about how great Fort Wayne is and how our vision to the future and all this. It's going to be some real good, interesting propaganda that's going to be coming out. But I want to help them, because perhaps they graduated from the Fort Wayne schools and don't know Fort Wayne history too. So my proposal to them is that when you're coming to downtown Fort Wayne, when you're on North Clinton heading south, as you're approaching the Martin Luther King Bridge, as you're coming around those little curves here on the street by Science Central and what have you, I still say this, that right before you get to the bridge, the land there can be landscaped on both sides of the street. On one side, you put you landscape it, nice hill, almost like an entrance, like people having their driveways. As you come into the driveway, it looks real grand. It's an introduction and opening. So on one side of Clinton Street, I'm proposing that the statue of Anthony Wayne be moved and put right there on one side of the street. On the other side of the street, I'm proposing that you put a statue of Little Turtle on the other side. Again, the guy that came here to kill the Indians and the guy that killed the most Americans. They're opposite, they're on the east side of the street, representing, two sides, two polar opposites. But as you're driving south on Clinton Street, you're approaching the Martin Luther King Bridge. I think that that bridge can be used as a metaphor that ties all people together. And so far that hasn't gone very far, but I think that makes total sense. And not only that, it'll show Fort Wayne history as being more inclusive, because when you discuss Fort Wayne history, it's all about Anthony Wayne, his generals, and everybody killing Indians, you know. And it doesn't really go into how they all had slaves too. That's a different story. Well, almost different story, because at the time that President Andrew Jackson issued his Indian Removal Act in 1830, well, it wasn't enforced here until 1846, when they got all the Miamis and what have you out of here. But you can't stop there, because in 1851, Article 13 of the Indiana Constitution, Indiana said, well, you know, we don't want blacks here either. Now, we don't want slavery. We are definitely against slavery. We want them blacks free, but we don't want them coming to Indiana.